We've had weeks when we've run out of food. We've just about managed to serve everybody. You know, I've got a tray of spares, and I've had the last order I had to make up out of the spares using, I'll keep photocopies of the balanced diet forms, and I know what to do. So we have run out, and those weeks, very strangely, we found that most other food banks in this borough have come close to running out.
The report had three main recommendations. One was actually addressed to the food bank movement, the volunteers, the people that give, to ensure that we can actually take the development on a stage rather than leave it where it is. Secondly, we looked at the rip-off merchants, the people who run gas, electricity, all the utility companies and mobile phones, to question why they charge the poor more than they do the rich, because if one can deal with that, it means that there will be more money in the pockets of the poor. And the third broad area of recommendations was to the government, ranging from education, how do we make sure children aren't hungry in school or leaving school hungry and remaining hungry? What are we actually doing about raising the statutory minimum wage, which we have in this country? Because people were coming before us earning the statutory minimum wage in the country with all their top-up benefits and still having to use food banks. And then we, of course, addressed the Department of Work and Pensions, because they pay out the weekly benefits to people who have no other major resources. And we made two major recommendations there. One is that if you're relying, it's your only source of income, waiting sometimes weeks, maybe months before you get your payment is totally inadequate. And therefore, in those circumstances, the department should pay out emergency payments, which they can do, to prevent people from having no money and using food banks. And also because we have quite a strict regime of conditionality. You have to do things now, thank goodness, if you're going to draw your benefit, which I'm in favour of. But it was quite clear that these sanctions, as they're called, are not always applied consistently or fairly, and we recommended a yellow card.
I think this report really highlights some of the challenges with the workings of the benefit system. This is something that Oxfam has been highlighting a lot, about the need for there to be a real safety net when people hit a crisis point, that people expect there to be a safety net that kicks in, and making sure that that safety net still exists for people. And this report, I think, highlights some of the ways where it's not working as it should and some steps that could be taken to mend that.
Benefit sanctions have seen increase. Benefit delays have always been a problem because it's stated on the form the reason why they come, right? Or if it's the job centre, there's no space. We ask them, so we find out if it's benefit delays, low wages. We've even had working people had to come in here.
We were really disappointed by the government reaction to our report. It was the most in-depth study of why people were using food banks, the triggers that meant that they'd reached this kind of crisis point of having to go to a food bank, and then presented a series of very reasonable and quite practical steps that we felt the government could take in order to dramatically reduce the numbers of people who needed to go to food banks.
The aim of our report was not to continue the trench warfare between the two parties, both blaming the other side for the existence of food banks, but to get a new debate going. Now, whether we're going to succeed or whether in this pre-election period people just fall back into the easy, unthought about responses to this issue, or whether, as what we tried to do, a report which would allow the government parties and the Labour opposition to turn over a chapter and begin again.
the more that you can actually help develop that food culture around people in really practical, tangible ways in schools through food banks. The food banks shouldn't simply be handing out food, brilliant work that they do in this crisis situation that we're in, but also educating people about how to cook it, how to prepare those fresh vegetables. We know that that's part of the solution as well, so we would commit to that. We would also commit, I have to say, to some of the fundamental social and economic policies, and that is to do with putting the national minimum wage back on an upward trajectory. We've said £8 by the end of 2020. Some people have said it should be more, some people say it should be less. But it's back on an upward trajectory because it's been withering over the last few years. But beyond that, it has to be living wage, because the idea that we're in a society where people are going into food banks, a quarter of them being in work going to food banks because they simply don't have enough money to buy food on a regular basis or to pay their rent.
If the government doesn't take any action, there's going to be growing pressure on them to do so. So I'd be very surprised if they don't take action, some of the measures. But of course we're interested as well in the opposition that might form a government after next May's general election. So we're as keen as a group to find out what the opposition intends to do as what the government will do.
I'll give you one prediction is, I don't think they'll do anything in response to it. But we will, and part of that is a joined up food strategy that says to everybody in this country, you should be able to eat safe, nutritious, affordable food, and you should also be able to earn the wage and have the income in your house that sustains your household. Not to be a millionaire, just to have a decent standard of living.
There is a sense that this shouldn't be happening in Britain today, but I think that hopefully this report and all the attention that it has had is a moment for us to say, this is not something that any of us want, but it's happening, and now how can we work together to tackle it?
I could quote you 50 examples, but I would probably end up getting a bit too emotional, because I'm not interested in the politics, basically. I'm not political. I may have been in the past. I am certainly not political now. All I care about is health, feeding the people. They desperately need help. If I thought for one moment that the people coming here weren't genuine, I wouldn't give up my Monday afternoons, and I also work for a food bank on Friday morning, and intend expanding that, because I can see the demand continuing, shall we say. I wouldn't wish to sort of postulate any more than that.